The first day at my new school, I found a table with two identical twins. That single decision almost cost me everything.
The first day at my new school, I found a table with two identical twins. That single decision, born from a desperate loneliness, almost cost me everything. I can still feel the weight of that cafeteria tray in my hands, a cold plastic shield against the roaring sea of unfamiliar faces. Southern Lehigh High School in Pennsylvania was my new prison, and as a junior, I was the last inmate to arrive. Everyone else had spent years building their fortresses of friendship, their circles locked tight with inside jokes and shared histories. I was an island, and the tide was coming in. Lunchtime was the worst of it. The school had a cruel policy. Only seniors were granted the freedom to escape for lunch. For juniors like me, the cavernous, echoing cafeteria was our mandatory purgatory. The smell of greasy pizza and disinfectant hung in the air, a nauseating perfume for my social anxiety. That first day, I walked in with my head down, my eyes scanning for an empty chair, a sliver of space where I could become invisible. But every table was a thriving ecosystem, buzzing with conversation and laughter that felt like a physical wall. My heart sank. I didn't just feel alone. I felt like a ghost already seen through. And then I saw them. In the far corner, tucked away from the bustling center of the room, was a table with just two occupants. They were mirror images of each other, two boys with the same dark, carefully styled hair and sharp, observant eyes. They looked partially Hispanic, but spoke with no trace of an accent. They weren't talking, just sitting in a comfortable, shared silence that felt both intriguing and isolating. It was the least intimidating spot in the entire room, my only port in a social storm. Summoning every ounce of courage I had, I walked over, the sound of my footsteps swallowed by the din. "Mind if I sit here?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. They both looked up in unison, their gazes sweeping over me with an unnerving synchronicity. They exchanged a glance, a silent conversation passing between them in a split second. The one on the right finally gave a slow, deliberate nod. "Yeah, sure, it's just us." Relief washed over me. I slid into the seat, introducing myself. They were Antonio and Bruno. Their calm demeanor was a balm to my frayed nerves. They asked about my move, why I'd transferred here, and they actually listened. They didn't barrage me with questions about people I didn't know or places I'd never been. For the first time that day, the knot in my stomach began to loosen. Then Bruno leaned forward. "We're hanging out after school. You should come." It wasn't just an invitation. It felt like a lifeline. I figured, why not? I had to start somewhere. I took their numbers, a small digital token of my first connection. The rest of the school day passed in a blur, the sharp edges of my anxiety softened by the prospect of having actual plans. Later that evening, after I dumped my backpack at home, my phone buzzed. It was a text from Bruno. "Hey, me and Antonio are heading out. Meet us at the old cemetery on Maple Road around 9. There is a cool spot in the woods by the lake." I stared at the message. The cemetery was only a 10-minute walk, but meeting there at night sent a faint, primal shiver down my spine. But then I rationalized it. It was a Friday. No school the next day. This was what adventurous people did, right? They explored. They took chances. I texted back, "Yeah, I'm down." As the time approached, a second text came through from Bruno. "You still coming?" "Yeah, leaving in a few. We meeting on the road by the gates?" I confirmed. "Yeah," he replied instantly, and so I went. The walk down Maple Road was unnervingly quiet. The street lights were few and far between, creating pools of orange light, separated by long stretches of deep shadow. The rustle of leaves in the wind sounded like whispers. With every step, the reality of my situation deepened. I was a new kid in a new town, walking alone in the dark to meet two strangers in a cemetery. The romanticized adventure was quickly morphing into a palpable sense of dread. I pushed the feeling down, attributing it to first-day jitters and an overactive imagination. I reached the iron gates of the cemetery, their silhouettes stark against the night sky. I texted Bruno. "I'm here. Where are you guys?" His reply was immediate, as if he'd been waiting with his finger on the send button. "We're deeper in, by the lake in the woods. It's a better spot. I'm sending you my location." Freshman year, a substitute gym teacher looked at me in a way that made my skin feel too tight for my body. It was 2007, and the sky outside was a bruised, stormy gray, matching the ominous feeling that had settled in my gut. He was an older man, not ancient, but well into his 50s, with a head of steely gray hair and eyes that didn't just see you, they assessed you. When he took attendance, his gaze passed over the other girls and then landed on me. He did a double take, his eyes lingering for a few seconds too long. I shifted uncomfortably. I'd always been told I looked older than I was, but his stare wasn't one of simple observation. It was predatory. He told us we were playing volleyball, and then, oddly, he disappeared. He slipped out into the hall by the locker rooms and was gone for almost the entire 40-minute period. We ended up just milling around, the unstructured time feeling strange and illicit. When the bell finally rang, signaling the end of the day, a collective sigh of relief went through the class. All I wanted was to get changed, get on my bus, and go home. But my locker wouldn't open. I spun the dial, using the combination I'd used every day for weeks. Nothing. The lock refused to click open. I tried again, slower, more deliberately. Still nothing. A cold trickle of panic ran down my spine. I had to go find the substitute. I found him standing near his office, a small, windowless room off the main gym. "My locker won't open," I said, my voice small. "I think I forgot my combination." He smiled, a thin, lipless stretch of his mouth. "Give me a moment. I'll get the master list." I waited outside the girls' locker room, shifting my weight from foot to foot. The place was nearly empty now, the sounds of showers and slamming lockers having faded away. He returned with a large, leather-bound ledger. To my surprise, he didn't hand it to me. Instead, he walked right past me and into the locker room. I had no choice but to follow him in. The air was thick with steam and the smell of cheap shampoo. One other girl was hurriedly tying her shoes in the corner. The sub walked over to my locker and squinted at the page. He tried the combination. The lock didn't budge. He tried again, more forcefully this time, and let out a low, awkward chuckle. "Stubborn thing, isn't it?" he said, his eyes flicking towards me. I forced a laugh, wanting to be polite, wanting this to be over. He tried a third time, and as he did, he placed his hand on my shoulder. His palm was warm and heavy. "Don't worry," he said, his voice dropping to a conspiratorial tone. "We'll figure this out." His hand remained on my shoulder as he tried the combination again. And then, slowly, deliberately, I felt his hand begin to move. It inched down from the curve of my shoulder, sliding slowly down my back. A jolt of pure electric revulsion shot through me. I jerked away, stumbling back a step. "It's okay," I said, my voice too high, too loud. "I'm really late for my bus. I'll figure it out tomorrow." He looked at me, his smile never faltering. Nonsense. He turned back to the locker, tried the combination one last time, and with a sharp click, the lock sprang open. He smiled, a triumphant, knowing look in his eyes. "See? We figured it out." Then he turned and walked away, the ledger tucked under his arm. I waited until I heard the heavy door to the gym swing shut behind him. The locker room was now completely silent, save for the drip, drip, drip of a showerhead. My hands were shaking as I fumbled with my lock. I needed to get out of there. I shoved my gym clothes into my bag and pulled on my jeans. I was just fastening the button when it happened. The lights went out. Not a flicker, not a brownout. A total, absolute, pitch-black annihilation of all light. I couldn't see my own hand in front of my face. The darkness was a physical presence, thick and suffocating. My heart hammered against my ribs. I finished pulling up my pants, shoved everything haphazardly into my backpack, and began to feel my way along the cold metal lockers towards the back exit, my eyes strained, trying to find any source of light. The only illumination was a faint gray rectangle from a high window, casting just enough light to create deeper pools of shadow. I inched forward, my breath held. I was in an intersection of two locker rows. To get to the exit, I had to turn left. But some deep, primal instinct made me look to the right first. And there he was. He was peeking at me from around the corner of the lockers. Just his head, one eye, and that same thin smile, illuminated by the dim gray light. He was watching me. He had been waiting in the dark. A strangled gasp escaped my lips. I didn't think. I just ran. I bolted for the exit door, my backpack bouncing against my shoulders. "Wait," his voice called out from the darkness behind me. "Wait, it's not what it looks like." I didn't stop. I hit the push bar of the exit door and burst out into the pouring rain. The cold water was a shock, but it was clean. It was real. It was free. I ran across the soccer field, my shoes sinking into the muddy grass, and didn't stop running until I was off school property. I walked the rest of the way home in the rain, soaked to the bone, the water mixing with the hot tears of shame and fear that streamed down my face. By the time I got home, I had made my decision. I was too embarrassed, too emotionally scarred, to tell anyone. Not my parents, not my friends. It was a secret I carried alone, a dark stain on my freshman year that I kept hidden for a very long time. A moment later, my phone chimed with a pinned location, deep within the forest behind the graveyard. A new knot of anxiety tightened in my chest. The woods were dense and dark, a wall of blackness, but I'd come this far. Using the pathetic glow of my phone's flashlight, I left the road and pushed my way into the undergrowth. Branches snagged at my clothes like skeletal fingers. I called out their names, my voice swallowed by the oppressive silence. "Antonio? Bruno?" According to the pin on my map, I was close. That's when I heard it. Not a voice answering my call, but the crunch of a footstep on dry leaves. Then another. Slow, measured, and getting closer. I stopped dead, my breath catching in my throat. "This isn't funny, guys," I yelled, my voice trembling. No answer. Just the slow, deliberate footsteps, circling me now. The primal part of my brain, the part that knew about predators, screamed at me to run. I decided this was beyond stupid. I turned on my heel, intent on getting back to the safety of the road. The moment I turned, the slow footsteps exploded into a sprint. Before I could even process the sound, a powerful arm hooked around my neck from behind, digging sharp, painful nails into my throat. I was being choked, my airway crushed. I heard Bruno's voice, but it was twisted, guttural, screaming, "Grab him! Don't let him go!" Pure, unadulterated adrenaline surged through me. I thrashed, elbowing backwards, and managed to loosen the grip just enough to wrench myself free. I didn't look back. I ran. I sprinted through the trees, branches whipping my face, my heart pounding a frantic rhythm against my ribs. I could hear them crashing through the undergrowth behind me, but I was faster. I burst out onto the road and didn't stop running until I was slamming my own front door shut, gasping for air, my body shaking uncontrollably. My parents were horrified by the deep, red scratches on my neck. They wanted to call the police immediately, but I convinced them to wait until morning so I could report it to the school with the evidence, the text messages. The school took it seriously. Confronted with the digital trail, Antonio and Bruno were expelled. I blocked their numbers, a feeble attempt to digitally erase them from my life. I tried to convince myself it was over. But about a week later, I woke up in the dead of night, shivering. My room was freezing. I squinted in the darkness and saw it. My window was slid completely open, the curtains fluttering in the cold breeze. I always locked that window. My blood ran cold. I crept to my parents' room. "Mom?" I whispered, shaking her gently. "Did you open my window?" She sat up, instantly alert. "No. Why?" "It's wide open," I said, my voice rising in panic. She shook my dad awake. "Honey, wake up." His window was open. My dad, groggy and annoyed, grumbled, "Oh, for God's sake, grow up. It was probably just unlocked." "Go back to sleep." Dejected and terrified, I left their door ajar and walked back down the hall to my room. That's when I noticed it. A small, chilling detail. My bedroom door, which I had left fully open, was now half closed. I froze. My breath hitched. Every instinct told me not to go in. With a trembling hand, I pushed the door open just a crack, peering through the slit into the darkness of my room. And I saw him. A figure, tall and silent, standing perfectly still behind the door. I screamed for my dad, a raw, piercing sound of pure terror. As I screamed, the door slammed shut in my face. A second later, my dad came rushing out, bursting into my room and flipping on the light. The room was empty, but in that split second before the door had slammed, we both saw the leg of a person, clad in dark jeans, disappearing out the window. My dad ran to the window, then downstairs and out the front door, but he came back minutes later, breathless and empty-handed. "They're gone," he panted. We called the police. I had to recount the entire story, from the cafeteria to the woods to the figure in my room. The officers were sympathetic, but clear. Without concrete proof of fingerprint, a clear sighting, there was nothing they could do. They told us to get better locks and maybe some cameras. I knew, with a certainty that chilled me to my soul, that it was them. It was Antonio and Bruno. I had to live with the terrifying knowledge that they knew where I lived, and that they had been inside my home, standing just feet from where I slept. The safety of my own room had been violated, and the shadow of that night followed me for a long, long time. In high school, I was a band kid. It was the easiest elective, or so I thought. You either did band, orchestra, or chorus, and I chose the saxophone. Our band teacher, Mr. Nicholson, was a kind but perpetually weary man. His grading system was simple. Show up to class and attend your weekly one-on-one lessons, and you got an A. It was a generous system, but towards the end of one quarter, I'd gotten lazy. I'd missed 2 of my weekly lessons, and my grade had plummeted to a B. Desperate to salvage my GPA, I went to him after class. "Mr. Nicholson, is there any way I can make up those lessons I missed?" He sighed, adjusting his glasses. He seemed reluctant, but finally said, "I can let you come in during a lunch period. You can practice in one of the downstairs storage rooms. I'll count it as a lesson credit." I was elated. I had no intention of actually practicing, of course. I'd just hide down there and play games on my phone for 45 minutes. It was a perfect scheme. The next day, I grabbed my saxophone case and headed down the stairs outside the music room. The basement of the music department was another world. It was perpetually cold, with a damp, earthy smell. The fluorescent lights hummed and flickered, casting a sickly greenish glow on the peeling paint of the cinder block walls. The hallway was narrow, with a series of identical, unmarked doors on either side. Each door led to a tiny 7-by-7-foot room, packed with a chaotic jumble of chairs, broken music stands, spare instrument cases, and holiday decorations covered in a fine layer of dust. I picked a room at random and shut the door, the click of the latch echoing in the silence. I set my saxophone case on a stack of old choir robes, propped my music on a stand just for show, and settled onto a wobbly wooden chair. I pulled out my phone, an old iPhone 3, with no built-in flashlight, and started scrolling. The only sound was the faint hum of the lights and my own breathing. Then, without warning, the world went black. It was a darkness so complete it felt solid. I blinked, thinking my eyes were playing tricks on me. But no, the power was out. I stood up, stumbled towards the wall, and fumbled for the light switch. I flicked it up and down repeatedly. Nothing. The darkness remained absolute. A knot of fear tightened in my stomach. I felt my way back to the door and cracked it open. The hallway was just as dark, a tunnel of pure black. I held up my phone, the dim glow of the screen barely illuminating a foot in front of my face. It was then that I heard it. From down the hall, near the staircase, a door creaked open. Then came a sound of dragging, like a heavy plastic container being pulled across the concrete floor. And then the breathing. It was low and manic, followed by animal-like grunts, the kind of sounds you'd expect from a wounded beast, not a person. My blood ran cold. I saw a large, black storage tub being pushed out of that room and into the hallway, blocking the path to the stairs. I quickly shut my door, plunging myself back into total darkness. My heart was pounding so hard I could feel it in my ears. I didn't know who or what was out there, but I knew it wasn't a janitor. Janitors didn't work in the dark, and they didn't make sounds like that. I decided I couldn't stay trapped. I had to make a run for the stairs. I quietly opened the door again and crept into the hall, using my phone's pathetic light to guide me. I inched forward, my back pressed against the cold wall. I heard another noise from the room with the tub. I panicked, darting into the next closest open door and shutting it silently behind me. I stood in the new room, frozen, listening. The silence was heavier now, more menacing. And then I felt it. That primal, intuitive sense that you are not alone. The air in the room had changed. It felt occupied. My hand was shaking so violently I could barely control it. I lifted my thumb and pressed the home button on my phone. The screen flared to life for just a half second. It was enough. Standing in the corner of the tiny room, no more than 3 feet away from me, was a man. He was tall, his features distorted in the sudden burst of light, his eyes wide. He had been standing there, in the pitch black, waiting. I pretended I didn't see him. It was a stupid, futile instinct. But it was too late. I heard him shift. Then, a hand patted my shoulder twice, in a mockery of a friendly gesture. Then it squeezed, the grip tightening like a vice. I screamed and dove for the doorknob, my fingers scrambling to find it in the utter blackness. I yanked the door open, just as he tried to slam it shut. I burst out into the hallway and sprinted for the stairs, not looking back, my screams echoing off the basement walls. I crashed into the main-level music hall, gasping, sobbing, my story tumbling out in incoherent fragments to Mr. Nicholson. He called security immediately. 2 guards went down with flashlights. They came back up minutes later, shrugging. "Nothing down there, kid. Just looks like some of the music equipment got moved around. Probably a power surge." There were no cameras in the music hall basement. Without any proof, my story was just that, a story. The official theory was that someone had broken in to steal expensive instruments and I'd interrupted them. But I knew what I heard. I knew what I felt. And I knew, with a chilling certainty, that the man in the corner wasn't just a thief. He was something else entirely, something that enjoyed the darkness and the fear it bred. I never went into that basement alone again. One night, my friends and I hatched what we thought was a genius plan. We were going to sneak into the high school after hours. We knew of a broken window in the basement, one that led to an outside staircase. The only barrier was a short metal gate that was more for show than security. Hopping it made the whole thing feel more devious, more like a real adventure. We waited until it was fully dark, scouting for security cars before making our move. One by one, we boosted each other over the gate and squeezed through the narrow, broken window, dropping down into the school's basement. The air was stale and thick with dust. It was a labyrinth of forgotten supplies and broken furniture, lit only by a single dim emergency light in a far corner and the eerie red glow of an exit sign. "We should split up," someone whispered, and we did, our bravado fueled by teenage invincibility. I was poking through a stack of old yearbooks when I saw one of my friends, Jake, motioning to me from across the room. He pointed upwards, towards the door that led to the main school. "Let's go upstairs," he mouthed. I nodded, my curiosity piqued, and followed him. He opened the heavy door, and we stepped into the main hallway of the school. It was a surreal experience. The corridors I walked every day, bustling with hundreds of students, were now tombs of silence and shadow. Not a single overhead light was on. The only illumination came from the blood-red exit signs, casting long, distorted shadows that seemed to move when you weren't looking directly at them. I followed Jake down the hall, my footsteps echoing unnaturally loud in the vast space. The silence was oppressive. "Dude, this is way too creepy," I whispered, my voice swallowed by the darkness. He didn't answer. He just kept walking, his silhouette barely visible ahead of me. We turned a corner, and he pointed to the boys' bathroom. "I'll be quick," he said, and slipped inside one of the stalls. I leaned against the sinks, waiting. The minutes ticked by. The silence in the bathroom was even deeper, more intimate. I was about to tell him to hurry up when my phone rang, the shrill sound making me jump. It was my friend, Chris. "Where the hell did you go?" he asked, his voice tinny through the speaker. "I'm upstairs," I said, keeping my voice low. "I'm with Jake." There was a pause, then Chris said, "What do you mean?" "Jake's right here with us." My blood turned to ice. In the background, I clearly heard both Brendan and Roland say, "Hi." I stuttered, my mind refusing to process the information. If Jake was with them, then who had I followed upstairs? It was then that I heard the laughing. It came from inside the stall, but it wasn't Jake's laugh. It was lower, rougher, a cruel and humorless sound that grated on my ears. I looked up. Someone was peeking over the top of the stall door at me. A face I didn't recognize, pale and grinning in the red gloom, their eyes wide with amusement. They were standing on the toilet. A scream ripped from my throat. "Holy crap! Holy crap!" I yelled into the phone, backpedaling so fast I slipped and fell. I scrambled to my feet and blasted out of the bathroom, not caring about the noise anymore. I ran blindly through the dark halls, my panic making it impossible to remember the layout. Somehow, I found the basement door and flew down the stairs, screaming my friends' names. They answered, their own voices laced with panic. We found a large bucket, used it to boost ourselves to the window ledge, and scrambled out into the cool night air, one after the other. I was the first one out, collapsing on the grass, my body trembling with adrenaline and relief. We were all outside, laughing now, the terror transforming into a wild, hysterical euphoria. We were safe, but we were also loud. As we stood there, catching our breaths and replaying the event, I happened to look back at the school building. My eyes were drawn to a downstairs window, the very one we had just crawled out of. And there, with his hands pressed flat against the glass, was a figure. We could only see the bottom half of his face, but it was enough to see that he was smiling. He was watching us. Roland didn't need to say anything. He just ushered us. Go, go, go. Get the hell out of here. We ran. We ran until our lungs burned, and the school was just a distant silhouette against the night sky. We came up with a lot of theories in the days that followed. A homeless person, a janitor, another student playing a prank. But none of the explanations ever truly fit. None of them explained the feeling of pure malevolence that emanated from that grinning face in the window. We never snuck into the school again. Some doors, once opened, are better left closed forever.